you would find a section of the site called Better Software for Science, which lays out a set of particular focus areas, including open source and research, software publication and archiving, and career paths and incentives that we're actively focused on supporting right now. In terms of so one useful thing I think to say in this context is that unlike my fellow panelists, Sloan is a private philanthropic funder. What that means is I tend to think of private philanthropy as being sort of smaller in scale than federal funding and somewhat more, I'd be interested if others would disagree, but somewhat more agile. I think part of our role is to do sort of early, sort of in some ways speculative seed funding of work. A lot of what I try to find opportunities to do is fund things that either would fall through the cracks of disciplinary research programs or are in some ways either too small scale or too idiosyncratic to be able to be institutionalized in a larger funding call. We'll talk more about this, but we don't run open calls. In fact, most private philanthropies don't run open calls for proposals. Instead, we are constantly welcoming letters of inquiry. Sometimes those letters of inquiry will turn into more substantial efforts. One example that's very relevant to the conversation here, we started with a handful of years ago with a set of questions around how does open source get supported within a research institution? Who's there to help offer guidance on project governance or how to structure a repository or help to train researchers to become maintainers of open source projects? We found our way into some sort of specific funding of a couple of individual efforts. And then earlier this year, we actually did run an open call for people who are looking to build open source program offices at universities. So sometimes a place like Sloan does institutionalize funding, but really in most cases, it starts with a conversation with a program director like me. These days, some of the primary things that and I should say, I apologize for not being there in person. I was excited to be in Chicago with you all on Monday and Tuesday, had to be back at the offices in New York this morning, and so I'm just joining remotely. But our support for US-RSE is a great example of the kind of community level or institutional capacity funding that is a lot of what I'm spending my time thinking about these days, particularly thinking about how to wed that with sort of early stage project funding, but again, not at the scale of some of my colleagues here. I think maybe I'll leave it there and turn over to the next panelist and look forward to the conversation.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, hi,
Yes.
I'm Jenny Lee. I'm a program director also from National Science Foundation. And for NSF, we support science, engineering, health, and also some of the national defense. And our budget is about 10 billion per year for the whole NSF. But for science, computer science, we about 1 billion for computer science. And I'm from the OAC, Office Advanced Cyber Infrastructure, about a quarter of the computer science. So you can calculate that. It's about a quarter of that. Can I share my slides? Here's the list of the program we have for the learning and workforce development. So this is a list of the program I have for inside the learning and workforce development, which is about a quarter of the OAC, and OAC is 1/4 of size. Okay, so we can do the math there. And this is a list of the programs. And as you can see, some of these on the left here, it's more fundamental. We support like REU, we support undergraduate students. CRII, we support new faculties. Career, we support also the entry level faculties. Core program, we support the core research in the field. We also have some graduate programs here for graduate students. And up to here, those green, yellow ones, those ones we support researchers and also cyber infrastructure professionals. For instance, cyber training, we support scientific researchers for them to use cyber infrastructure. And Skype, we use that to support cyber infrastructure professionals. We can train them, and we even give them the stipends or their salaries to support their salaries. So for this program, for instance, the Skype program, each proposal can support up to 4 full-time employees. And another one is called access program. Many people heard about that probably, which is that for you to gain access into all the cyber infrastructures. CSSI is a sustainable computing systems to support scientific research. And we also created some new programs called Science MSI, which is to support minority serving institutions to expand their research. And we have a desk program, which is also a new one to support research in the areas of sustainable computing, try to design for sustainable computing. And those are our programs, and we still have a closing, which means that we have also have a new programs in the work. People are working on new programs. Do I use up my 5 minutes, or should I say anything more? Okay, I'm also a professor from King University, State University of New Jersey. I'm a rotator, so this is my, I'm here 1.5 years now, and the maximum is 4 years. So I will rotate back after 4 years. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go with this. So sorry guys for the disruption over here. So you heard from 3 of the funding organizations: Just Greenberg from Alfred Sloan Foundation, Bill Spotz from DOE, and Jenny from NSF. So my name is Ishwar Chandramouliswaran. I'm from the National Institutes of Health. And for those of you who don't know, let me just put this. I have a couple slides to kind of quickly walk you through. And hopefully the way I am sharing this, they'll be able to hear me as well. So, so again, just for those of you who may have forgotten all this commotion, the Slido, if you want to ask questions of any of us, is slido.com 1970228. Thank God we have that, so you can at least put your questions there and they can answer that for you and prepare for that. So again, as I said, I'm from the NIH, and for those of you who don't know, NIH is part of the US Human Health and Services agency that comprises of 27 different institutes as shown on this slide. Our primary mission is turning discovery into health. And said differently, we focus on curing diseases, increasing the longevity of life, as well as finding cures for new diseases. Where do I sit? I sit in the office of the director in a new office that is formed recently called the Office of Data Science Strategy, that's focused on data science programs and implementing what we call NIH's strategic plan for data science. And this has kind of come into being in the last about 5 years or so with the advent of data science, big data, and the importance of engineering being embedded into all of biomedical and health science research. The strategic plan itself in the office is focused on both scientific, technical, and operational collaboration and coordination across the 27 implement the strategic plan. What is the strategic plan? It comprises of many different pillars, but what I wanted to just point you to is in the direction of software being given a front and center seat and importance along with everything else, as well as workforce development in this software area as well. So that's kind of what I wanted to kind of touch on, and what are the efforts we're doing in this space over here. So just kind of call it at a very high level, we try to bring in both physical health science scientists and researchers and computer scientists into our program through partnerships with NSF, DOE, and other agencies as well. We have targeted supplemental funding opportunities to our existing programs, particularly with a focus on enhancing sustainability, and reuse of research software, because we found oftentimes that software is developed and embedded as part of our research grants, but once that grant is over, the software gets discarded and never sees the light of the day. So we want to find ways to kind of bubble this to the surface and fund this. And then lastly, we want to build a community of practice, and we're fostering and developing best practices that we have recently published on our website as well. So I'll let you a little bit more about what these are. But most importantly, we've recently issued a request for information that focuses on gathering public opinion on best practices for openly sharing research software. We want that to inform our guidance as well as best practices over here, and as we mature and make software front and center as part of our research efforts. This RFI is open through to February, so you should have plenty of time, and you have a URL and QR code over here. Hopefully, please note this. Share this widely amongst your community, and please take an effort to respond to this RFI. You can do this as an organization. You can do this individually as well. We want to hear from you so we can shape this guidance and policy to make it most useful and usable. And most importantly, build a community around the software that NIH funds to advance and accelerate research. We have a couple of other programs will be as various career levels. So this is something called the Data Scholars Program to advance technology advancements, and we bring in advanced data scientist expertise. So think of it as a sabbatical for those of you who are in specialized areas. We have topic areas that are submitted by the various institutes. So we kind of solicit and do a matchmaking of the expertise with the question to be answered and the problem to be solved by the institute. And this is usually a 2-year post. And so we accept applications every fall, I think around this time, or maybe the application just closed for this year, but next year is available as well. So this is a fantastic program, and we've had some phenomenal research and work products come out of this in the last couple of years. We have 2 other earlier career programs. One is a graduate data science summer program that focuses, works with the Office of Intramural Training and Education. It's primarily a summer internship program, and then students must be master's students over here. There's more information, and this is kind of a short-term program. There's another one that we're just piloting. We haven't had anything yet, but this is again for early career data scientists from diverse backgrounds to contribute to. The applications are not open, but they will open later this year. So please take a look at this and do apply for it. There are multiple tracks over here, and this will evolve as the years go by. And again, would appreciate your input on this as well. The highlight that I wanted to kind of touch on is looking at how the landscape has been evolving. We have a concept that we submitted to our Council of Councils to get approved for funding opportunities. So we thought this would be something of value and attractive to the research software engineers to support building sustainable foundations for open software tools in both biomedical and behavioral sciences. The 2 opportunities, one focuses on the career track itself to pilot a model to support research software engineers in this space. And the second one is to fund projects to foster software. So one is really focused on the career and funding salary and travel support for the research software engineer as a kind of a principal investigator equivalent. And the second one is really product development and product enhancement to sustain this in such a manner that it can adopt and adapt and work with different domain-specific researchers and take a life of its own in terms of sustaining the product itself beyond a point. So there's lots of specifics on what the application requirements and things are. Of course, these are concepts that have been approved. The funding opportunity itself hasn't been announced yet, and we hope that it'll come out soon in all likelihood. So please be on the lookout for that. This is just more of a heads up for you. The purpose of the initiatives, again, the R50 is really, we want to be able to, we recognize the growing and burgeoning RSE community. We want to support the exceptional research software engineers and the so-called non-traditional PIs as we recognize it. We want to make a sustainable impact on NIH projects, and we want to embed it more into our programs and projects. We hope that this would give the RSEs the autonomy and the career continuity to kind of advance these projects in an independent manner and work with multiple domain-specific investigators beyond the life of that one project. The RO3, or the more small research projects, is really focused on product development. The focus is to develop robust, shareable, and sustainable software over here and bring in best practices. As much we've talked about the last 3 days about kind of improving that and bringing that into the biomedical and behavioral research space. And most importantly, build communities and foster collaborations around that. And we hope that this would extend the impact of the investment that we are making in reuse of this software and building communities around that. With that, the last program that I wanted to kind of highlight to you is a stewardship program. Again, kind of we've heard a lot about that over here. The purpose is to really kind of support fair practices, as we've heard a little bit across the 3 years, and good data management practices that include in fair appropriate use of software and some foundations around that. The program itself focuses on understanding the landscape of fair practices, including software, transferring this knowledge between and across the different stakeholders, and bringing in the right expertise. And so we have many partnerships with communities around, including the carpentries, that we hope to make that available to our research community. If you can't remember all the things that I've said, here's a newsletter that our office puts out weekly on the various activities and funding opportunities and ways that you can engage with us. So please follow that. Also, of course, you can reach out to me. My email is ishwarc@nih.gov. Much easier than my last name. And then you can also follow me on LinkedIn as well as Twitter. So I'll stop there and we'll look at the questions and get through that.
In the chat, the question about when we're funding for software sustainability and maintenance, what kind of data the funders want and need to support decision making? Yes, should I answer that one? Okay. Currently, when we have for the software, we have a program called Post. I usually look for the how many downloads for your open source software, like if that's the one open to the public. But for your domain specific software, for assigned software like CSSI ones, we're usually asking for your domain scientist to write a support letter saying that whatever framework you're building, the cyber infrastructure you're building, will be useful to layer scientific research. That's what we're looking for. And I noticed another question is relevant. Do we need a metric for that? That would be nice, because currently we're looking at the publication metrics, but we don't have a metric for software. If it would be nice to have a software metrics that we can look at, that would be really helpful to us. Rather than that, currently all I can do is just look at how many downloads, right? How many contributors, right? Okay, thank you. Josh?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think, you're absolutely right. Like, this is the data that we currently have to work with. I would go so far as to say it is imperfect and at times frustrating to have that data. The last thing you said, I think, is useful, is gestures in an important direction, which is it's not just about, like, first, we need better usage metrics. We need to have a better understanding of what software is used and in what ways. Download is one, thing we can get at. People, like, I think we're at a point where GitHub stars is not so particularly useful, but when I think about like getting better analytics around inbound dependencies, how many code bases rely on a particular piece of software, that's an interesting signal in a particular direction. We don't have good telemetry on use of a lot of particularly open source software if it's in a distributed fashion. I've heard people speculate about, could we get better analytics out of computing facilities and clouds to sort of aggregate some data about relative usage of software. This is all very speculative, and I don't think we're there yet. The other thing that I do think is really important that you just gestured at is not just usage, but also the community around software. How brittle is the developer community around it? How robust, how diversified? What do the contributors look like? At Sloan, one of the things we've been doing is funding the Chaos Project, which is an effort to formalize some community health indicators that at least can help us help inform decisions. If we're going to make the trade-off and say we're going to focus on sustaining or maintaining an existing code base rather than funding a piece of new science. Those are the trade-offs that funders are always navigating. If we're going to do that, then we need to feel confident that investment, that there is a robust both user base and ability to maintain that software among the developers. And frankly, I think in terms, like, we need much more nuanced metrics for that than we currently have.
It's quite challenging to do. But so anyway, so I can speak from NIH's perspective. So I think we have been steadily seeing an increase of RSEs being included in our funding opportunities, and which is what we recognize. But those don't necessarily surface to the top, and which is why, in terms of sustainability, we have these concepts for new funding opportunities that we have issued, that the RSEs can take on the rein themselves and drive this as a PI themselves. And so that's kind of how they can have a combination of support for themselves and their teams as they can form that in from a career trajectory by putting in application for the so-called the R50 award of the programs once it comes out.
The Department of Energy tries to distinguish itself as a funding agency from other funders in one way by supporting large teams, and those teams, they'll usually involve research scientists, an applied mathematician, computer scientists, and maybe software developers. So sometimes the proposals are made where a hire will be made in the future if the funding is received, or it may be an existing staff member at a laboratory, say, who gets to do that work. That's our traditional model, and as I said earlier, we are just now getting into the software stewardship and advancement field, and we'll be putting up these. We plan to fund several projects that are devoted specifically towards research software engineering. So for those, I expect to see some hiring opportunities to start in the new calendar year.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So Josh, would you like to say also something to
Sure.
this question?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hey, it works. So I think the one thing that I would just add to the points that were made so far is, at least particularly speaking from a private philanthropy context, where often a particular grant is sort of hashed out in iterative conversation with a program officer or program director. I mean, the best way to incorporate support is to write it in as a budget line and to clearly articulate the value of that support. I mean, I'm going to be really blunt. I've seen a lot of proposals that put a tremendous amount of software development on the backs of graduate students. And I'm aware of there are times you're going to get extremely good software engineering from students or postdocs. There are a lot of times that you're not. And depending on how critical the given software development is to a particular grant project, I think, at least at Sloan, I can say we're getting more and more sophisticated at being able to think about, okay, what are the technical development goals of a particular grant, and how does that match to the actual expertise and capacity of the staff that are in place? So when I see a budget line written in for, not necessarily in one of my grants, but in a, energy or environment or an economic modeling grant, or a data analysis pipeline grant out of one of our science programs, seeing those budget lines actually increases the confidence in the sort of technical execution of the grant. And I think one of the ways that you educate funders and encourage us to be more proactive about funding those lines is asking for those resources, particularly prioritizing them potentially over other elements of the budget. If there's a fixed cap on the size of a particular grant, the fact that a proposer says, I want to spend this much of it on an RSE relative to the other potential expenses is a really important signal, and one that that I think as a funder we take really seriously.
Thank you so
Right.
much. Then, yeah.
For NSF, we have both. I really would like to bring to your attention the Sky program. I think I mentioned it just now. The Sky program will support full-time employees, which could be the RSE for 5 years or maximum 7 years. So that it's independent programs. You just apply to that program, and then they'll use the money just to support cyber infrastructure professionals, which include RSE. Also, the other kind is that if you apply to other programs like SS or other ones, you can add into your budget the cost for the RSE. So both working for us.
Fantastic. Many thanks. So we are looking at the next question, Slido. So I would like to know another one here. Oh, yeah, we have that already. Oh, sorry, yeah. So organizations decide who is permitted to be with PI. Many RSEs are in job classifications that do not come with PI right. How do you see navigating this obstacle? So maybe we start this way, the other way around. Jen, you start.
Okay, my suggestion is a collaboration or protest. Tell them that you can be a PI. Yeah, because I do give out to anyone who, RSE, we do give the grants to people who are RSEs, so not necessarily to be a faculty or professor, right? Because, for instance, the cyber infrastructure professionals covers everything, everyone, right? So you can apply. Right. If your school don't let you apply, explain to them that get you to apply. If you they won't let you apply, then collaboration. Collaborate with some faculty member and someone who can apply and work together to submit a proposal. Right.
Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, Josh.
If I can add to that, so I've actually had arguments with sponsored program offices where I was not willing to have a grant go to somebody else as PI in name only if the technical work is fundamentally being done by someone in an RSE role. The two concrete things that I would say is this is not so much a policy issue for the funder as as was just said. We're very happy to make a grant. We make a grant to the institution, and the institution designates who's the PI of record for that grant. What I will say is, if there are ways that, and I'll say this very directly in this context, if there are ways that policy decisions at the funder level can help influence those questions of who gets granted PI status at a given institution, I think that's a kind of conversation that US-RSE could very much pick up and amplify and advocate for. If US-RSE is finding that its members are having difficulty applying for even, what we're hearing is there are direct funding opportunities for RSEs, both sort of support at the individual level and for projects. If you all are not able to apply for those because you don't have PI status, then it's possible that US-RSE might be able to consolidate some of that feedback, help to position it for us. And if there are things I can do in my guidelines or my signaling that indicate who a legitimate PI is, or what the technical expertise required is, or other things, if there are things I can signal that can help sort of lower the frictions or foster that policy change that ultimately needs to happen at the institutional level, I'm very happy to be a collaborator in that. But I think that really needs to be driven by the RSE community to surface and articulate those things and advocate on behalf of the community.
Yeah, I think Josh kind of summarized it, that we are enabling that with the expertise and experience that we kind of expect. So if you can harness together to make that change in the institution, and let us know how we can help you do that, so that you can get that independent PI status for this.
So yes, now Bill is switching.
Yeah, I like some of the things that have been said here. I would emphasize that we put out these proposals to review, and we have a very specific set of questions for the reviewers to answer, including the qualifications of the people submitting the proposal. And they notice things like maybe a famous piece with less than 10% of their time, and more junior people, say, doing the majority of the work, that usually doesn't go over really well in terms of the review comments and the scores that they give us. Meaning, at the end of the day, the proposal should really reflect, what you plan to do and who plans to do it. As for, PI status within an institution, I don't have any influence or say over that, but certainly, make your argument internally. I think you would find support among program manager types if it, accurately reflects the work that's going to be done.
Maybe stay directly
Okay.
there, then we don't make so much rolling. So the next question I looked at, so there are several highly rated. So how can funding agency ensure that review panel members appreciate the role of RSEs in software projects? That that the review panel also see that.
Well, every review has its own process. I like to have panels where the reviewers speak to each other. Generally results in better reviews, and often reviewers, who everybody has gaps. Proposals are supposed to be new work, and nobody, is going to have expertise in every aspect of a proposal. And if we've got our reviewers together and talking, that's really good. And then, they all get some kind of spiel at the beginning about what we're looking for and what we're hoping for. And in a software development heavy type of program, we're going to emphasize the role of software engineering. So,
Okay. Thank you. So next, Jen, you would like to say something, and then you can.
Okay, I have two points for that. One is that in our review templates, if it's something relevant to software, we do add that, so the reviewer will pay attention and will be more supportive of us software engineering. The second thing is panelists. When I invite panelists, many of you I invited you, I think. So I do try to invite RSEs to my panels. Because I myself, I worked at Bell Labs for 18 years before I became a professor. And at that time, I write code to support research. So I understand the RSE should be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic. Also, yeah, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most straightforward way to make sure that RSE perspectives are represented in review panels is getting RSEs on review panels. And I'll just call out one thing that came up in a conversation yesterday, which is, as a funder, one of the hard things is, so at Sloan, we don't do open review panels. We actually assemble, we treat proposal review almost more like you think about a manuscript review. So I'll assemble reviewers for a particular proposal. But whether it's panels or individual proposals, I think actually one of the hard things from a funder perspective is, building that network of people who want to serve as reviewers. I can do a lot of, searching and mining of the literature to try to figure out, okay, who's an RSE who's worked on this kind of, modeling project that could offer insight on this particular proposal. And I do a lot of that work. I would propose a thought, which is that something that, US-RSE could do is actually maintain a list or a database or a pool of potential reviewers for funders. If there was a list like that you all, assembled, that if everyone in the room wanted to say, oh, here's my areas of expertise, I'd be willing to serve and help review, if that lowers the barriers, makes it easier for us in the funding side to be able to say, oh, here's somebody who can fit this review panel. I think we're allies. I think we're really eager to get more of those, perspectives represented, and that could help move things along much faster than at least my own limited bandwidth is able to do.
Thank you so much. I will be a fan of this list, so I will ask who would be interested to be a reviewer here in the room.
Oh, I want to see the room with the hands up so badly right
Yeah,
now.
I know.
And also we pay for it. We pay for it.
Yeah, we pay. Like, we value your time.
So I can tell you, I see something like 20 hands, and some people put both up. Maybe even 30. I see it. 30. So you also would like to?
No, I mean, I think I just echo Josh's point, but I do want to say that I think NIH recognizes the need of the transdisciplinary experts in most of the reviews. For most of the things in data science, we have special panels, but even for the study sections, we're working towards advocating for having a data scientist, having an RSE, having the different dimensions being incorporated into the study section as a routine part of it to bring in that diverse perspective. So having that roster would be an incredible asset. Not that we make the decisions ourselves. Each agency functions differently. At NIH, we don't have the ability to make the decision on who reviews, but we can make recommendations to those that conduct the reviews, or the scientific review officers in the Center for Scientific Review. And so they would benefit from this roster. So yeah, I would kind of vote for that as well.
Very cool. So I know we are at the top of the 1 hour we planned for. We had a lot of problems. Jen, Josh, do you still have a little bit time to stay maybe 15 minutes longer on? Yeah, cool. So then we can still take another question. So one is, metrics for traditional research impact are well recognized, like the H index. Would a similar software-oriented index help funding agency evaluate proposals? Jen?
I think I answered that earlier. We do look at the publication, citation, those, and for the software, we look at the how many downloads, how many branchings, how many contributors, those ones. But as Josh also mentioned, we don't think this is sufficient. It would be nice to have either more complex, more sophisticated metrics. That would be very nice to have.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. Yeah, I heard that in your first answer, but I thought maybe also Josh or Bill or Ishwar would like to answer the matrix question. Josh?
I think I'd also sort of spoke into this a little bit before. I mean, the thing that I'll say is there are two pieces of this that I've been thinking a lot about. One is the relationship between a given code base or a given piece of software and the research literature. So in other words, if there's a very well-cited study, how much of the aura of that study's impact does a given piece of software that was used to produce that study inherit? That's a very different question from what I would think of as maybe the right way to put it is software native metrics, where I think a lot about, I mean, there are measures of a given code base itself, but also particularly I'm interested in dependency graphs to think about, like, because software isn't just a single standalone thing. There is, we can think in terms of a stack and understanding the sort of interdependency of different code bases. I've been very interested in the question of kind of infrastructure, but not infrastructure as an absolute category, but basically what are the dependencies that a given researcher has on other code bases? What's sort of lying beneath the surface that needs to either be maintained or invested in order to make, everything up on the surface run. Those are the kinds of measures that I think we don't really have right now. And it leads me to a certain sense of a feeling of, if not precarity, at least a sense that maybe we're not allocating resources optimally across the broad, universe of potential research software projects.
So I think this is a fantastic question, at least from NIH's perspective. These metrics for measuring usage, utility, and impact are much needed, and we've been on a quest for that from from a data perspective, so extending that beyond data into other objects as well makes perfect sense. So there's a lot that you can do yourself by organizing competitions, participating in other community activities. There's one big international community, the Make Data Count, that looks at it from a data perspective, but you can bring in the dimensions of software to that, and kind of we can further this to identify, and that would definitely help us in measuring the value and the usage and impact of software as well, and in enabling it to be sustained better.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I serve on the internal task force that set up this software stewardship effort, and internally we've had debates about this, and they've been fun to participate in, but have not come to a set of conclusion or any conclusions that feel usable at this time. So, for example, the use, the dependency for other projects and so forth is a really good idea, but it has some drawbacks because it may take a long time for a really good software package to penetrate where it needs to go. We have seen for a long time, since DOE is kind of well known for not committing to supporting our software in the future, that people simply didn't want to adopt it, even though it did exactly what they needed it to do. So there are other metrics to discuss, none of which have kind of risen to the top. And I kind of feel at this point, maybe it's the community's responsibility to have these discussions and tell us, what criteria would be best for metrics along these lines.
You can stay there.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask one question directly, so that the audience knows, how do they interact with each of the agencies? So how can they contact DOE, but what are the means to get funding? Because it's quite different between the different agencies.
So how can RSEs
reach out to you? Yeah, RSEs reach out to you, get funding, but what are the processes at DOE?
Yeah. So we post our email. I get all kinds of email all the time, and I try to respond to all of them. There are specific funding opportunities out there, with the exception of what I've discussed here today, and those proposals are already in. Most of them are heavily focused on research and support software engineering as a byproduct. That's kind of the attitude, but yeah, I don't know that I have much additional to say.
So Josh, how is the process at Sloan?
Yep. Yeah, one thing that's really important to say in a context like this is that interacting with private philanthropy is somewhat different than a federal agency. It varies a lot. Some philanthropies do run open calls. The Chan Zuckerberg Initiative I think just closed yesterday. It's essential open source software for science, latest round. At Sloan, we don't generally run open calls with specific deadlines. If you go to our website and you click on apply, you'll see guidelines for a letter of inquiry. And I think it's really important to note that in a lot of cases when dealing with private philanthropy, where there isn't an open sort of call for submissions, it starts with a conversation. It starts with sending a concept. And the biggest mistake that I see people make is investing too much time in trying to make that perfect, as opposed to good enough to convey your core idea. And my job is to figure out, does that align with our portfolio? Does that align with our program interests enough that it's worth having a conversation or starting an iterative process of honing in on a project? That's very subjective. We also handle a far smaller number of grants than any federal agency. In a given year, I handle maybe I'll actually make maybe 50 grants that are going to range in size from a meeting support all the way up to, you know, multi-million-dollar sort of large project support. But all of those largely start with an initial inquiry and a conversation. And so if you're the thing that I'll say, the last thing I'll say is, if there's a private funder that seems aligned with what you want to do, and usually if we're doing a good job, we're putting the word out somehow about what our program priorities are, being as authentic as possible about what the work is that you want to do, and then getting that to us quickly in a developed enough form that we can understand what you want to do and what it's going to cost. The other thing that people often will do is send a project concept and not let us know, oh, what's the rough budget for it? But send that, you know, in a rough enough form. Bullet points and a back of the envelope budget sketch is often plenty fine. And then we'll try to get back to you in as timely a fashion as possible and figure out if there's a match or not. But it's a much more idiosyncratic and subjective process on the private philanthropy side, I think, than in the sort of more structured calls for proposals you'll see elsewhere.
So from NIH's perspective, yeah, we are large and diverse, so it could be challenging, but there's a couple of different simple ways. We have something called an NIH guide that gets published every week. You can either follow it by subscribing to the newsletter or just go visit the website. You can see all the funding opportunities, and it's as consolidated as it can be across all the institutes over there. Of course, I also showed you in one of the slides, you can subscribe to our office's newsletter that distills it from a data science and an informatics perspective. And last but certainly not the least, we have an extraordinarily rich set of staff in our program officers who are an incredible source of what and how to navigate, how to find funding and navigate. If you had any interactions with them, you shouldn't hesitate to kind of tap into their expertise and reach within the NIH to find out opportunities and help you guide them both pre-award as well as post-award. So.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Jen?
For us, I think the best way to start is to search the keyword NSF and then the name of the program. So I just now in my first slides, I give you all those names, just a search for those programs. Once you see the solicitation, they have a contact email address. You can contact the PI, not the PI, PD, the program director for that program. And that's the best way. And also need to prepare to write one-page summary, usually include 3 sections, an overview, and intellectual merit and broader impact, 3 sections in 1 page, and then send it to the program director and then ask them where you should send this proposal to, which program you should pick. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. So yeah, thank you for bearing with us with the technical problems. I apologize for that. And with that, thank you, yeah, to the panelists. This was a very exciting time.